This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase, go to squarespace.com and use the discount code MacVoices. Welcome to Mac Notables on MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is a special edition. It's sort of a crossover between a normal MacVoices Mac Notables episode and the Road to Macworld, because, well, we have to be on the road to Macworld, and that means we have to talk to Ted Landau. Ted, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
It's always good to be back.
Yeah, it is. It is. And this time, I wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about what you're going to be doing at Macworld, because you're going to be doing a session and maybe a few other things.
No, just one thing.
Just one thing. Okay, well, you'll be doing other things, but maybe not.
I'll be walking around, yes.
Yeah.
In terms of what you're referring to, I think just one thing, as of now, unless something else comes up. Yes, I'm giving a Macworld session, and it is going to be the last session that I ever do at Macworld, Macworld Expo or Macworld iWorld, depending upon how you're talking about it. And the reason is that I'm retiring. And it's not a forced retirement. At least I don't think it is. It's not as if Paul Kent said, "That's it. You're done here. Don't bother us again." It was my own decision. I told Paul that this is what I want to do. And in terms of why do I want to retire, I don't know. I don't have a great answer for that, other than that I thought it was time. That I've been doing this for something like 20 years. I think in the early '90s is when I first started talking at Macworld Expo, and I'm older. I'm 20 years older than I was then, and I'm at an age where I think I've made my contribution. I've said all that I care to say, and I'm ready to sit back and relax and enjoy future Macworld Expos without the extra anxiety, stress, whatever of having to give a talk. And so I retired.
That's interesting, Ted, because you make it look so easy. I never think of you as having any anxiety or stress or anything.
Well, I don't want to oversell that. Yeah, I'm not the most anxious person when it comes to giving these talks. I mean, in my other life, I was a college professor where I had to stand up in front of classes and talk several times a week, and so the idea of staying up in a crowd and talking is not anything that's foreign to me or difficult. But still, you have to prepare a talk and try to make it good. You don't want to give a talk and have people walk out and say, "Well, that stunk," and I'm always worried about. But yeah, it's just regardless, even if it wasn't stressful, I don't want to make it sound like that's the main reason that I'm retiring, because I can't stand the stress anymore. No, that's not it. It just contributes to it. It just says, I'm just saying, I think I've reached the point where I want to retire. Yeah, I'm in my 60s. It seems like a reasonable time.
Nothing wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what have you chosen as your last topic for the show?
Well, that's where the other source of anxiety for this particular talk comes in. I decided, my first thought, and then I just flew with it, was I would give a sort of last talk where I offered a retrospective on my career, looking back on things at the expo that I've done, as well as other things I've done, writing books, doing the MacFixit website, and so on, and then offering some anecdotes that go along with it that I thought would be fun to talk about, most of which I had never talked about publicly before, getting into, for instance, the problems that I had when I sold MacFixit and so on, which I don't really ever talk about, and then offering just whatever little bit of wisdom I think I might have acquired about doing websites and writing books over the years, and then looking ahead, which is what Paul asked me to do when I talked about this talk with him, looking ahead to where I think all this is going to be going in the years ahead when I'm not going to be giving talks at Expo to talk about. So, and so that's what I decided to do. But then, and I have a talk, I actually put a talk together, and I actually gave the talk for the first time a couple of nights ago at a local Macintosh users group, sort of out-of-town tryout. And I thought it went well. The people in the crowd seemed to think it went well, so that was encouraging. But, there's a part of me that I guess my biggest nervousness about it, a couple of things that relate. Well, one is it's all about me. I've never given a talk that is so focused on me. And it wasn't clear to me that people were that interested in hearing a talk about me. They go to Macworld Expo to find out how to use their Mac for some task that they're trying to accomplish, or to get tips and tricks, or learn about the future. Finding out about Ted Landau's prior accomplishments and career is not the main reason people go to Macworld Expo. And it wasn't clear that would be interesting. And by the same token, I'm sure as time passes, there are less and less people that go to Expo. As younger and younger people show up to the Expo, there are probably people at Expo that have no idea who I am. Because, they'll look on the program and say that Ted Landau's going to talk about his career, and they'll say, "Who the hell is Ted Landau? Never heard of him. never heard of him before. Why should I care about his career?" So I have this sort of nightmare vision that I will show up for the talk and nobody will be in the audience, or that people will show up and walk out midway through when they discover that it isn't what they wanted to hear, or something like that. But that aside, especially given how the talk went the other day at the user group, I'm encouraged that those things won't become reality.
Ted, when we started Mac Notables, you and pretty much every other person that is on the panel kind of had the same reaction when we started talking about it. It's like, well, okay, but why would anybody want to hear from me? And to a person, I looked at you guys and said, really? I mean, you're Ted Landau. Who wouldn't want to hear from you? Who wouldn't want to hear your opinions? And at this point, your experiences, past and present, you are one of the bedrocks of this community. And I think there's some truth to the younger people thing, and that's always going to be the case when you've been around for 20 years. But I would think that there'd be people clamoring to hear this, to see, what lessons you've learned and see what your vision is for the future ahead. So I don't think you need to worry about that part.
All right, well, that's very kind of you to say that. I appreciate it. And just to be clear, I wasn't, a little different than what you were saying about when we started McNotables, in the sense that if I'm talking, say, about troubleshooting, one of the topics that I frequently talk about, I can imagine who would want to hear it, because people are interested in useful troubleshooting information. So maybe I had a little hesitancy about why, initially when we were doing this, I don't even remember what you're saying, to be honest with you, but maybe I had a little hesitancy in the beginning about why they would want to hear it from me, but I don't think I would have. I'm surprised that you actually said that I said that. But it's different to be talking about me. I'm not going to be talking about troubleshooting. I'm going to be talking about my biography, so to speak, and so that's a little bit different. But in any case, we'll see. Maybe I hope you're right, and I hope it goes well.
I think so. And, another interesting thing has happened along the way that none of us saw coming, and that was this medium, the social media sites and everything. I think that people feel like they have more of a relationship with a lot of the notable people in the community and the prolific people in the community than maybe they did back even when you were writing the books. I mean, back then, you were a vaunted figure, but the only time they ever got to see you was if they came to Macworld, live. And now they can subscribe to your Twitter feed. They can get a feel for the Ted Landau humor and seriousness, and hopefully they can do the same thing here. And I think that changes people's perceptions and makes you more appealing, makes people want to get to know you, and they feel they do and would want to come and see you talk.
All right. Well, I'm holding you to that. So,
okay, folks, don't make liars out of me. Get to Ted's session.
If they don't show up, I will be coming after you afterwards. So,
I will look forward to it.
Okay.
When is the session, Ted? Do you know? Yeah,
Thursday at 4:00. It's the last session of the day on Thursday, which is actually nice because I think it will give me a little room to go over if I need to. I've been having trouble cutting it down to 45 minutes, especially really if you want it to be time for questions. It should be less than 45 minutes, and I've been struggling. The one that I did it the other night, the Macintosh Users Group, was about 50 minutes. So so it'd be nice to have a little leeway there and not have to worry about another talk coming up right after mine.
Maybe you can take everybody out for a drink later.
That's it. The drinks will be on me.
Or maybe they can take you. Maybe they can take you out for a drink. Although there's a lot of drinks.
No, I'll take them out for a drink.
Well, I would be lying if I said that I'm not disappointed, but I certainly think that it's if it's what makes you happy, man, that's great. That's what you need to do.
Cool.
And then you can come and wander the halls with the rest of us next year.
Well, and if it doesn't make me happy, I don't I'm committed to the idea that I'm not going to be one of those people that come out of retirement the next year. Like you see in sports sometimes, where a sports figure retires, and then 2 years later he's back because he discovers that he didn't really want to leave the sport after all. It usually never works out well when they come back at those circumstances, and I'm not going to make that mistake. Right or wrong, I'm gone, and I won't be coming back. I mean, I'll be coming back to Macworld Expo, but not as a speaker.
All right. Well, I won't rule out the possibility of trying to draft you, but you will have the option to say no.
Okay.
So, Macworld Expo. Let's talk about it in a broader perspective. Any particular things you're looking forward to other than the talk and seeing friends and all that this year? Do you think this is going to be another continuation of what's been going forward, or do you see any changes in the conference tracks and all?
No, I've looked over the conference tracks a little bit, and I think it's pretty much a continuation of where they've been going. They have the typical tracks. They have the rapid fire talk that they've had. They have one or two new things. I think about new top products that are going to emerge that they've been soliciting applicants for. But I think I think for most people, at Macworld Expo, I believe, or Macworld iWorld, as it's now called, has stabilized. People don't talk anymore about, is this going to be the last year or anything like that, and people don't talk about how the exhibit hall floor used to be very different than it is now, and we've sort of come to accept. Excuse me a second. We sort of come to accept that the way Macworld is now is the way it is, and it seems to be surviving quite nicely, and I hope it continues to do so. For me, it isn't as much the newsworthy event that it used to be. It used to be, I went and I learned a whole bunch of new things. I went and there's a keynote where Steve Jobs or somebody would reveal all the new things that was coming from Apple. And then I'd go to the exhibit floor, and there'd be all these booths where software that I'd never seen before, sometimes never heard of before because they were being released at the expo, would be available, and you'd go see them for the first time. You'd make all these discoveries about new software, new hardware, and so on. That has almost all gone. There might be a couple of programs, especially iOS programs that are going to be revealed at the expo, but by and large, most of what you're seeing, there are no big keynotes anymore that reveal new information. Apple is gone. There are no big announcements typically on the floor. Most of what's on the floor has already been publicly available either by press releases on the internet or at previous conferences like CES and so on. And so you don't get those big news anymore, and so I don't go for that anymore. Instead, I go partly to hear some interesting talks. There's still talks where I can learn some stuff. Someone can give a talk about, I don't know, some topic about how best to use AirPlay or something like that. And I can go and sit in the talk and learn some tricks about AirPlay that I didn't know or something like that. And so it's interesting to hear the different talks that are being given, and it's interesting to walk the floor and see some software that, even though I knew about it, I hadn't actually seen demoed before, and then there's just the sense of community, and it becomes an annual place where I can get together with the Mac community and talk about Mac things with people who are interested in talking about that. So that's always fun.
I feel like they've done a great job, because you're right. It's not the news event that it used to be, but it can't be because of the internet and the way the world has developed. Mm-hmm. And not just because Apple's not exhibiting there or doing a keynote there anymore, but everybody seems to be running on their own cycle, and everybody's not satisfied with waiting until next month or 2 months or 3 months to get their product out there. They want to get it out now. They need to get it out there because you never know who's developing something similar. So I think the days of it's interesting to contrast CES, and of course that's what everybody tries to do, but some of those companies and some of those industries are still trying to run on a schedule and say, well, here's the new, it's almost like the fashion thing. Here's the new spring line. Mm-hmm. And Mac and the technology world at a computing level doesn't seem to do that anymore. And frankly, I think it's good. I think it's refreshing because there's not the pressure at Macworld for us to review it and cover it and know everything, and for people to go there and say, oh, I've got to make a big splash here or not.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And I commend Paul and all the people who work at Macworld for making that change, because I think it was a conscious decision on their part. They could have continued saying we're going to do Macworld the way it used to be and just hope it's good enough and watch it slow. I think that would have been a big mistake, because it would have just slowly gotten worse each year, and the comparison to how things used to be would just get, the disparity would get bigger and bigger until eventually there'd be no Macworld. And so they said, no, we can't do that. That for the reasons that you said, even with disregarding Apple's leaving Macworld, just the fact that every company has their own website where they publicize things now has changed the way the world works. And so they had to change, and they came up with a way of changing that has worked. I think it's great.
I know it's my favorite week of the year. I look forward to seeing you and seeing all my other friends, at this event and all the events surrounding it. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that far away, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And folks, please write down right now in your schedule, make sure you go see Ted. He'll have a lot of interesting things to say.
Yeah, no doubt. If only to save your skin.
Well, yeah, there is that.
don't want to make a liar out of Chuck.
No, please don't. So we had a couple other things on the agenda for this time around. The Netflix and Comcast situation. I know this is one that we've bandied back and forth a couple times. What do you make of some of the recent developments? What's your take on them?
Well, when I first saw the report, my first reaction was to applaud, because I was a victim of the problems that were developing due to this. I think we may have talked about this before, but back last October, I believe, I suddenly started watching Netflix on Apple TV, but turns out it didn't matter. On other sources, I had the same problem, but usually I watch Netflix on Apple TV because I like the interface the best there. And all of a sudden, what used to be like HD quality broadcasting was now super low quality. I mean, I think there's a little program that you can run on Netflix that will, in real time, show you the resolution of the screen, and would drop down from 1920 by 1080, I think was the maximum it got up to something like 320 by 10. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but and it looked crappy. You could tell. And no matter what I did, I couldn't. I reset the Apple TV. I tried a different device. I tried a Blu-ray player that had Netflix access to see if that improved things, and it was just crappy all the time. And so I called Netflix to say what's going on, and they told me it wasn't their fault. They said, we are not a content delivery person in the company in the traditional way. We just send out these packets, and the packets contain the necessary information for a high definition broadcast. And if you're not getting it, then it's because your internet delivery provider is preventing it in some way, and so you should call Comcast. And I said, well, how come? I was skeptical, and I said, how come, if what you're saying is correct, that the only thing I have a problem with is Netflix? I go to HBO Go, it's perfectly fine. I go to iTunes Store, it's perfectly fine. Every other source that I look at is perfectly fine. It's just Netflix. And they gave me what I didn't take to be very convincing argument as to why Netflix would have a problem, even though these other things didn't. And I sort of sighed and said, okay, I'll give it a try. And I called Comcast. And of course, Comcast said, not our fault. Comcast said, we're not doing anything to block them. We haven't changed anything from when it was working to when it wasn't working. It's possible that when the traffic gets really high, that the content might degrade to some extent, but that's about it. They claim that if there's a problem, if there's a big problem that's different than it was a week ago, which was the case, and then a month ago as it persisted, that call Netflix. And I went back and forth like this. I had some very heated discussions. One time, the person on Netflix hung up on me, not because I was being insulting or cursing or anything like that, but just because I just wouldn't agree with them. And every time they said something, I asked another question that tried to point out the logical fallacy of what they were saying. And after about 20 minutes of doing this, they just hung up on me. And after a while, I just gave up and said, "Screw it! I can't get good quality for Netflix. Hopefully this will get sorted out eventually. It was good 2 months ago. Hopefully one day it'll be good again." And sure enough, sometime in December, I think this persisted for about 2 months, from October to December, but sometime in December I turned on the TV and suddenly high definition was back. And I said, yay. But I've been worried that it's a temporary respite, and that any day it could go back to the crappy quality, because I didn't know what caused it to begin with, so who knows if it would happen again. And so then I read this news of this agreement, and I said, first, a couple of things. First, the two companies are finally publicly admitting that there's a problem to be solved, which when I called them on the phone, neither one was willing to do. And the other thing is they claim to have solved it. So I thought, great. But then I think I tweeted about that, and then I was, I received some flack, because then got into the whole thing, well, this isn't, never mind your personal victory for watching Netflix in high quality definition, but it's also a controversial issue in terms of net neutrality, and is Comcast now going to start charging people for getting faster access to their pipes and so on. And I've read a number of articles since. It's a pretty complex thing, but the gist of it is I believe this is somewhat of an exception to the net neutrality issue. It's not exactly a net neutrality matter. The truth is that it costs, I believe, an enormous amount of money for Netflix to deliver all this high-definition content at a reasonable speed. I mean, I've read estimates that say on a given evening, 30% of all internet traffic is due just to Netflix. And not only is it the traffic, but it's this high definition content that requires a lot of bandwidth to get to an individual user, and so somebody has to pay for that. And I think it's reasonable to expect that Comcast isn't going to absorb 100% of the cost of that. Otherwise, every time a company comes, what happens to Comcast when 10 companies like Netflix come along and place even greater demands on Comcast, and Comcast has to keep upgrading their hardware and paying so that all these other companies can deliver their content at no cost. I don't think that's a viable model. So asking a huge company like Netflix and to share some of the cost of the burden that they're placing on companies like Comcast, I don't think is unreasonable, and I don't think it's necessarily a slippery slope to saying that Comcast is now going to charge Ted Landau 10 times as much as I've been paying if I want my website to be delivered to people at a reasonable speed. I don't think we're going there. That aside, when you're dealing with companies, especially like Comcast, on Netflix maybe not so much, but Comcast has misled and lied, and maybe I shouldn't say that publicly, but my dealings with Comcast, I've never really felt that this is a company that has the customer as pleasing the customer as its primary goal, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's more shenanigans going on here than I'm aware of. So we'll see how it shakes out.
I've read the decision too, or the agreement, I should say, and I don't know. I always feel that there's a lot more behind these things than is made public, and that the press releases are being written by publicists who are trying to spin it one way or another. So, I think a lot of people feel the way I do, that at some point I want to turn on TV and I want Netflix to come up, and I just want it to work, and tell me what I'm going to have to pay to get that. And if I can afford it, if it's worth it to me, then I'll pay it, and if it's not, then I won't. Just sort of like cable TV from Comcast now. If it's worth it, I'll pay it, and if not, I won't.
Well, I agree with you, and that was part of the frustration I had during that 2-month period, whereas it wasn't like there was nothing I could do. My internet speed, I was paying for almost the highest internet speed that Comcast could provide. And according to my internet speed test that I ran, I was getting that speed. They were delivering it, and so it wasn't like. I mean, I was getting 54 Mbps at some point or something like that. I mean, really high speeds, and still still Netflix was choking, and there was nothing I could do. I couldn't give anybody $1 million and have them guarantee that I would start seeing Netflix looking better, unless they started using those drones to personally deliver the content to my house. But otherwise it wasn't going to work. So yes, it is frustrating.
This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase, Go to squarespace.com and use the discount code MacVoices. For a long time, I've wanted, intended, even threatened to create a MacVoices tech blog. I tried blogging at my personal website, but never seemed to get it off the ground. Well, that has changed thanks to Squarespace. If you subscribe to the MacVoices Dispatch newsletter, you already know about this, but the new MacVoices blog is now live at macvoicesblog.com. I decided to start from scratch, and I decided to use Squarespace to power my new site. Why? I've been telling you for quite some time now how easy Squarespace is to use. All my testing has confirmed that, but as with all products, living with it can be quite different than just reviewing it. But I'm pleased to report that Squarespace has been just as easy and fun to use as it was in testing. It took a little while for me to get over some of my biases from how things work on one of the other web platforms, but once I did, things came together fast, except for one thing. Squarespace makes it so easy to experiment with different themes, different looks, and different options that I spend way too much time doing just that. And that's not a bad problem to have, since it means you can get your site looking exactly the way you want it to. Or you can tweak this, or decide how that might look, or where this or that should go. Darn, I'm doing it again. It makes me want to do another site, or two, or three. Another thing I was impressed with, no matter which template I used, I couldn't mess it up. Squarespace simply wouldn't let me make a site that didn't look good, no matter how hard I tried. And I tried. Even if I set the font size to something unreadable by humans, the site design still looked great. I'll be updating you with my experiences in setting up this site over the next couple months to point out some of the more interesting parts of my personal Squarespace experience, but don't wait for me. If you've set up a Squarespace site, drop me a line at chuck@macvoices.com and tell me about it. Maybe I can steal a design idea or two, make a few changes. Darn, I'm doing it again! Or start a new site of your very own now by going to squarespace.com and signing up for a free trial. You'll get to sample the full power of Squarespace and all those great themes that I couldn't mess up no matter how hard I tried. Then, when you've decided you want to keep your new site, and you will want to keep your new site, get 10% off by using the code MacVoices. And that's at any level of service, including the options that give you a free domain name. So go get started. Squarespace.com and the discount code MacVoices gets you 10% off. You're going to love it. Squarespace. Everything you need to create an exceptional website. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this edition of MacVoices.
Ted, is it realistic at this point? Have we moved a little too far too fast for the technology and for the infrastructure to keep up? Or is the fact that you can get it off of iTunes, get it off of HBO Go, whatever, is that just testimony to the fact that the infrastructure is fine and it's somebody playing games under the table with some of the delivery methods?
Well, the infrastructure isn't great. I think most people acknowledge that the United States has one of the worst infrastructures for high-speed internet access in the world. Other countries, especially the countries in Europe, have much better internet speeds, and we are behind the times in that. And I think it's going to require a major change in technology. Maybe it's going to be like one of those P-cell things that we were reading about in the news the other day, or something else where we're reaching a limit where the current technology, at least in the United States, isn't capable of delivering all that we're going to want to see delivered. And technology usually saves us. I mean, every time you read an article that says if things continue the way they are now, by the year 2018, we'll all be up Craps Creek in some sense or another. But then before 2018 rolls around, somebody invents something that solves that problem, and then we never get to that point. And so, at some point that may not happen. Obviously, you can't count on that, but things have pretty much worked that way so far. And so I have this optimism that when it becomes impossible for the internet to deliver what we need delivered, someone will find a way to get it to work.
I hope so. Because all the arguments of net neutrality, all of these questions, I'm torn between the idea that this has become almost a requirement of daily living. It's almost now a utility level kind of thing, and the fact that somebody has to pay because laying copper wasn't cheap, laying fiber isn't cheap. Mm-hmm. It'd be nice if we can get a whole lot more speed out of Wi-Fi, then you don't have those issues. But we're not there yet.
But let me be clear. I am a very strong supporter of net neutrality because nothing else, because partly just because I think it's the right and ethical way to go, but also because I'm a personal beneficiary of net neutrality, and I don't forget that. When I started the McFixit website, which ultimately became very successful, one of the most I can't think the word I want to say now, but one of the places where people went quite a bit on the internet and won all sorts of awards, and I was able to sell it for a tidy sum. When I first started it, I was nothing. It was just me in my office with a couple of books on how to do HTML programming, trying to put together a website. Now, if at that time I started my website and somebody like Comcast called me up and said, well, your website is going to be delivered at some super slow speed, and people are going to get frustrated with how long it takes to load, and people aren't even going to bother going to your website after a while because it's going to take so long. If you want to get decent speed, you're going to have to pay us 10 times more money than you would otherwise pay us. And so much money, in fact, that you'd have to be a company like Microsoft or Apple or whatever in order to be able to afford that. And at which point I'd say, no, I can't do that. I am just starting up. I don't have any money to do that with. And so essentially what might have happened in a situation like that is that the big companies like Microsoft and Apple would be able to dominate the internet, and small startups like me would just fall off the map. And I think net neutrality is one of the things that contributed to people like me being able to develop websites and have them grow.
And how can you argue with that? It's like the U.S. highway system. It's there. Somebody has to pay for it. Everybody benefits from it at every level, including the guy delivering pizzas and the guy, delivering concrete blocks.
Right. Imagine if the left lane of the interstate highway system was reserved for people that had a special sticker, and that special sticker cost a lot of money, and that only very rich people could afford one. So essentially the left lane became the domain of rich people. How would that go over?
That's an interesting example. But then again, we do have, what do they call them? Commuter lanes or whatever that, you have to have so many people in.
But commuter lanes are not economically determined. It's a way of reducing. It's a way of attempting to reduce emissions and reduce the number of cars on the road. Not to show favoritism to people who have more money.
Yeah. Okay. I know I'm not going to win this argument, and it's not an argument because I don't disagree with you. I guess I'm a realist, and I'm trying to figure out what's the incentive for Comcast and Netflix and Cox and all the other providers to create the infrastructure that we need to supply the demand that is there, because seems like we're all demanding more and more. I'd like to do the show in 4K.
Well, my feeling is that Comcast may emerge the big winner here, much to my chagrin, perhaps. But, and this may drift into the next topic that we might talk about, but people have been waiting for Apple to come out with a expanded Apple TV, maybe even an Apple television itself, where they start selling 55 and 60-inch televisions. And I think something like that is coming, and I'm optimistic about what it might be. I think it's being held up partly by people like Comcast and Hollywood studios that need to get on board before it happens. But I also think there's a reasonable chance that it will never take off, whether Apple comes out with it or not, because a company like Comcast will get there first, so to speak. That Comcast is really greatly positioned because not only do they deliver cable TV, but they are also probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, internet service providers in the country. If you have a cable TV connection in your house, chances are you also have a cable internet modem that's delivering your internet connection from Comcast. And so even if you are a cord cutter, even if you found a way to say, that's it, I'm sending my cable set-top box, DVR and all, back to Comcast. I'm not using it anymore. Now I'm just going to watch television, whatever, over the air with an Apple TV, with a Roku device, whatever it may be. even so, you're still paying Comcast, because chances are, when you send that Comcast set-top box back, you're paying Comcast for that cable modem that's still sitting there in your office. And if television and everything shifts totally to being internet-based, so that cable connections are no longer a viable business, Comcast can just shrug its shoulders and say, "What? We'll get the money from the internet connection. We're there too." And in fact, if they have someone at their company with some foresight, they might even try to lead the pack in that direction. Taking Steve Jobs' adage about don't wait for somebody else to cannibalize your business, do it yourself. And they could be in a position to do what Apple is trying to do right now, but with the added advantage that they don't have to get Comcast to go along with them, because they are Comcast, and so by definition they'll be going along with them. So I could see that as one end to the story.
Now, take being an Apple stockholder out of the picture, and take being an Apple enthusiast. Mm-hmm. I don't much care who does it, as long as somebody does it and does it right. The does it right part concerns me, though, and Comcast's unwillingness, their seeming unwillingness. And let's be fair about it. You don't know what their obligations are and their contracts are with some of the other providers, the studios and ESPN and all the other networks. But they don't seem to be willing or able to unbundle things. They constantly make... One of the complaints is they make you buy things that you don't want to get things you do want, which, I guess maybe that's not exactly unheard of in other industries too. But and Apple seems to be trying to push the other way and say, okay, we're going to make everything available to you and just, get what you want. And if that channel requires you to pay for it, or if that TV series requires you to buy it from iTunes or rent it from iTunes, then that's fine. That's what you can do. So that's where I guess I get concerned about Comcast, but if they can deliver it, there might be some advantages to that.
If that's the big if. I agree with you. I mean, if they could deliver it and do it right, as you said, I wouldn't care that it was Comcast instead of Apple that was doing it. I don't believe that Comcast is going to do it right in the way that Apple would do it. And I especially don't think they're going to do it without reasonable competition. I mean, as an example, I just saw in the news the other day that AT&T was coming out with a new program where you would be able to do text messages internationally for free if you were one of their share customers. I forget the formal name of that program, where you share your cost among all the people in your family. And that you would be able to make phone calls internationally for as little as some small amount. I know, as little as a penny a call, I think is what I read, but I could be wrong about that. But anyway, very much cheaper than you can do it now, which is outrageous what they charge now for international stuff. Well, why are they doing it? I mean, one of the reasons for sure that they're doing it for the text messaging is apps like WhatsApp that was just bought by Facebook. That they're losing the war for text messaging, and the revenue. Text messaging used to be a cash cow for them, and now everybody's running away from it and using things like WhatsApp because they don't want to pay that. And so, without WhatsApp and without competitors like WhatsApp out there, you can be sure that AT&T would still be gouging you for text messages. And I feel the same way about Comcast, that without a reasonable alternative that can do what Comcast does cheaper, better in some way, there's very little incentive for Comcast to be cheaper and better. And that's unfortunate, but that's the situation we're largely in now, I think.
It does. Unfortunately, there's some precedent there, because you look what you pay for a gig of bandwidth at home, and then you look at what you pay for a gig of bandwidth through your cell phone, whichever carrier you have, and there's a huge disparity. And does there need to be any disparity? Since I'm sitting here at home now, and I can pick up my iPhone and hook up to my Wi-Fi network, and I'm downloading that gig at, I'll make up something and say, 5 cents a gig. But if I go down the street and I'm away from my home network, I may pay $5 for that. And, it's like, well, wait a minute. It's all bits. It's all ones and zeros. And the more it gets down to that, the companies seem to lose their hold on things because more people can jump in. And that's where you get concerned about who has control of the backbones and the pipes that are feeding all of this.
Now, it is a little different. If I were to play devil's advocate against you, as you often do with me, it's a little different delivering to a phone completely wirelessly through a cell connection versus something where wires are being used to get it into your house. And so I think it is cheaper to do a wired connection to your house once the cables are laid and paid for anyway, than to depend on these cell networks. But whether it accounts for all the price difference, I doubt.
Yeah, and you just glossed right over the once the cables get laid.
Anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of excavation and laying and materials, and then replanting, and I want my yard back after they finish digging it up. Which Verizon actually didn't do, but that's a whole other discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ted, what do you see as well, you have kind of your version of what the Apple TV could be, or what it could become. And I wanted to talk about that because I think it's an intriguing idea.
Well, I mean, it's just a germ of an idea. I just started actually thinking about today after reading a couple of articles on similar subjects. And the problem I was having, and I've always had, is the concept of should Apple make a television or not? And on the one side of the argument, I say, yes, Apple definitely should make a television because that's the only real solution. Because all these other solutions where you're just adding a box to an existing television, you still have all the crap overhead that came with the television, and you still have this remote that only the remote that came with the television can control some of those features on the television. And so you're still trying to figure out, how do I juggle an Apple TV remote and a Panasonic TV remote, and you're still switching between input 1 and input 2, and you maybe even still dealing with the cable company and their input 3, and who knows what else. And if Apple really wants to simplify all that, one way to do it is to make their own TV, and that was my thinking on that. But then there's the other side, which is I just don't see Apple in the TV business. The TV business is really cutthroat, not very, retail business where they're always discounting prices, which Apple doesn't do. TVs come in every imaginable size and shape and form, from these days from 32 inches to 80 inches, and there's LED and plasma and various options, and at each size screen level they have different levels of quality. And does Apple really intend to compete in that market? And Apple isn't big even, never mind just competing in the market. Apple is not big on selling things that take up a lot of space when you think about it. I mean, they even got rid of that cheese grater Mac Pro and came out with one that's 1/8 the size. You go into the Apple store, and things start with the iPod Mini, Nano, whatever. You start with the smallest iPod or iPod Shuffle even, and work their way up to maybe a 27-inch iMac, and that's about as big as things get. I can't imagine going into an Apple store and seeing a wall covered by 60 and 55-inch TVs. It's just not how I view Apple. So I have trouble. So how do you juggle those two things? And I haven't been able to come up with a good answer. I'm still not sure that I have. But one thing that I started thinking about today was, well, what if I imagined an Apple television, a 60-inch television that contained all the Apple hardware that allowed it to accomplish whatever Apple was hoping to accomplish. What is it that I would hope Apple could accomplish? Well, whatever else they have in mind, the one thing that I would hope they could accomplish is to eliminate the necessity for me to go through all these different remotes and input channels and settings and so on, so that I could go to my Apple TV and stay there 100% of the time. If I want to watch NBC, I watch it through my Apple TV. I want to watch HBO, I watch it through my Apple TV. I want to watch something from my iPad, I watch it on my Apple TV. You name it, and if I want to do it, I'm doing it through my Apple TV. I go there and I live there. And well, if an Apple television could do that, maybe another way that they could handle it is to take out all the hardware that lets them do that and box it into an Apple TV like you have now. Maybe it would have to be bigger, more expensive than the one that exists now, but that would be the idea. It wouldn't be that much bigger than the one we have now. And that you connect it to a television, as you do with the Apple TV now. So it's all pretty similar to how it is now, except for two things. One is you never have to leave it, so you can just forget all the other stuff. And it still might not totally solve the fact that you need a separate remote for setting your TV display and so on like that. But the other aspect of it would be that since everything is handed through the internet now, because Apple TV is an internet-based device, you don't need cable, you don't need over-the-air connections. Everything you're getting is through this Apple TV device and the internet. And when I thought about it that way, then I said, you really don't even need a television anymore then. If everything's being channeled over the internet through Apple TV, all you need is some passive display, essentially a very large TV monitor. And I can imagine even Apple selling, here it is in their Apple Store, here it is their Apple TV, and here's this 55-inch TV screen on the wall, and you can buy them both from Apple and set it up that way. And the 55-inch TV is nothing more than a glorified cinema display or Thunderbolt display. And you can buy that, and then they'll say, oh, but maybe you don't want to get this expensive Thunderbolt display. Maybe you want a 60-inch screen instead of a 55-inch screen. No problem. Apple TV works through ordinary televisions as well. So you can go to Best Buy, buy whatever TV you want, and still connect our Apple television to it. It may not be quite as nice an experience, but it'll work. And I think if Apple did something like that, it could be very close to the ideal situation of having the hardware and the television all come from Apple.
So you're talking, I think, and first of all, I love the idea, but really you're talking about what we have now, absent the cable connection. You have a Netflix box. Or you have the Apple TV, and you don't have any cable coming in. So the only thing that we have to really have is ABC, NBC, CBS, all of those, and the live sports channels delivering their stuff over the internet into an Apple TV channel. Is that a fair statement?
It's pretty fair, but that's a pretty big, if. I mean, to expect, that's where you're going to have to. I mean, that's where the major roadblocks come in, because now you're going to be talking about. Rubbing Comcast the wrong way. A model that says ESPN and NBC and ABC and CBS and Fox and FX and all the networks are going to be available live, just as they are now on television channels, through an Apple TV without requiring a cable connection, and that you'll essentially be able to call Comcast up and say, thanks for all the fun, but I'm done. So long. Now I'm going to get all my television from Apple. That might be nice and great for me and great for users and great for Apple, but Comcast isn't going to like it very much, and they're going to do everything they can to prevent that from happening. So, and they can do a lot to prevent it from happening. Well, like right now, I just saw on Twitter today that the Academy Awards this Sunday are going to be streamed live over the ABC television app. And so you'll be able to watch the Academy Awards on your iPad if wherever you happen to be, if you're not going to be home to be able to watch it on your ordinary television. The only caveat is that for it to work, you have to be subscribed to something like Comcast. And you'll have to identify that you're a Comcast subscriber before you can get the stream. So again, the idea that you'll be able to do things, a little cat coming along here, the idea that you'll be able to do things like watch the Academy Awards without having to pay Comcast a fee is still not there.
Well, I guess the argument is, though, too, that ABC affiliates send that out over the air, so you don't have to have Comcast. You can, depending on where you are, you can put up a digital antenna and get that for free.
Yeah, if you can get decent reception. It's harder and harder to get decent reception, and it's harder and harder, and what the networks are carrying is going to be less and less too. I mean, one of the reasons that, according to what I've read, one of the reasons that so many major sporting events are now on ESPN instead of CBS, NBC, or ABC is because the only way you can get ESPN is over a cable. There is no over-the-air ESPN.
I wonder how long it'll take before ESPN figures that out and finds a way to charge for direct delivery, sort of like the pay-per-view fight. I mean, I know those are through cable too, but the concept remains the same. You know, they took them off of network TV to put them on cable, and better yet, even a special pay-per-view kind of thing, so that they generate the money, they retain control, but they still get it to you.
Well, I think there's a major shakeout coming. I mean, I think all these forces are going to converge, and somebody's going to emerge victorious, and then it's all going to work for better or worse by whatever emerges. But it isn't clear to me how that's going to shake out yet, but I think it's coming.
And there's so many other forces, I think, here at work. There was a time that you had a limited choice of football games on do something very United States centric. On a given weekend, you had a couple football games, and if your local provider wasn't covering that game, well, you were stuck. If you're in California and you wanted to see the Redskins play, you're probably out of luck. Now you can buy packages, again, delivered by cable, but you can see virtually any game you want anywhere. And that, I think, too, changes the dynamic, because they can't force feed people with things anymore. People are demanding and getting more choice.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm aware of those. I've never actually enrolled in one of them, subscribed to one of them. But for someone like me, I'm not sure how much they cater to this. But someone like me, I lived in Detroit for like 25 years, and I'm still very much a Detroit sports fan, even though I've now lived in California for 9-10 years. And so I'd love to be able to watch, for instance, the Detroit Pistons play all their games, as opposed to just the occasional game that shows up on television. But I don't. Do they offer team-by-team subscriptions? Can you just subscribe to Pistons games? Or do you have to get some sort of NBA package where you get a lot of things that you may not want?
I can't answer that because I'm not a basketball fan, and I'm not even sure about exactly how the football packages work. I know they're there because I hear friends who they're diehard fans of this or that. I love the cat, Ted. That's just perfect. They're diehard fans of this team or that team, and I can't keep up with what they're watching or how they're getting it, but they're getting it. So it is.
I haven't looked into it either. I guess we should look into it. Well, maybe we'll get into it and get back to this.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Speaking of getting back to things, by the way, before I forget, last time we talked about whether I'm blanking here, the help me, Flappy Birds.
The Flappy Bird game controversy, and Angry Birds too.
And you asked me, you asked me whether I had ever seen advertising when I played the game, and I said no, because I probably haven't played it long enough. Well, I played it a few more times after that, and I realized that advertisements appeared every time the bird died, essentially. And before you could start a new game, a little advertising banner appeared on top of the screen. I had just never paid attention to it. As far as that is concerned, it wasn't there. So, but yes, there was advertising that appears all the time.
So this may be an advertisement for why in-app advertising is not so effective. I don't know.
I was too focused on the fact that I couldn't get past the first set of pipes. I finally did, by the way. In my investigation of this advertisement, I got to, I think my high score is now 6, which I'm quite proud of.
And you played the game strictly to do the research, right?
That's right. I've given it up. I'm not going to play any game that I get so roundly beaten.
Well, Ted, it's been fun. We will do it again, of course. And in just a few weeks, I get to maybe have dinner with you and see you across the table instead of on my screen.
Less than a month, yeah. And my cat here is very excited about the whole thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, what? Okay, before the people ask, what's the cat's name?
It's Miko, a Japanese type name.
Okay.
And it's one of our 2 cats. They're both rescued cats that we got from the SPCA in San Francisco.
Very nice. Very nice. Seems very affectionate.
Yes, she can be. The other one is even more affectionate, though he's not here now. The other one lives for social interaction. She's a little more independent.
Okay, so, no, I was about to ask if they have Twitter accounts, but I'm not going to go there. Yeah. Macworld, iWorld 2014, you get to see Ted Landau do his last session ever, along with a whole lot of other fun. So, Ted, we'll see you there.
Yeah, we'll probably see you before then.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But I will see you there. Now, look forward to it.
Great.
Okay.
Folks, we hope to see you at Macworld iWorld 2014. I keep saying that, and I really mean it. We really do. I know Ted would like to shake hands with you, and I'm sure you'd like to shake hands with Ted, and I'd like to just say hello, too. So, see you in San Francisco. Until the next time, this is Mac Notables on Mac Voices. I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching.
Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes,
to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date with all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.